Welcome to the Ghost of the Orange Bowl. I'm Jay Rao. You know, the Orange Bowl was home to some of the greatest dynasties in football history. You might remember the great Don Shula Dolphin teams of the early 70s, or maybe the University of Miami Hurricane teams that won 58 games in a row at the Orange Bowl. But what if I told you the first dynasty at the Orange Bowl was a high school team? The Miami High Stingarees from 1925 to 1951 went undefeated, a streak of 26 years without losing a game to a local school. They were so good that they sometimes had to go out of state to play decent competition. Well, they also shared the Orange Bowl with teams like Miami-Jackson, Miami-Edison, Coral Gables, and some of these games would draw 20, 30, 40,000 people. Don't believe me? Check out this video.
Coach Haywood Fowle of Edison High School. His team, the Red Raiders, favored to win. Coach Otis Mooney of Miami High School. His team, the Stingarees, the underdog.
Way to make a living. Sure is, Coach. It looks like we're going to have a pretty fair crowd. Yeah. Well, I just hope we have a that's right. Well, Coach, good luck to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
See you.
To the victor in tonight's game goes the city championship, the state championship.
As you can see, what an atmosphere at the Orange Bowl back in those days. And my guest today was a part of those great Miami High teams in the 1950s. Welcome to the show, Gene Mariutto, class of 1958. Gene, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
You know, Gene, you were indoctrinated into Miami High football from the time you were literally a little kid. Even when you were like 7, 8 years old, you watched your big brother Don play for the Miami High Stingarees at the Orange Bowl back in the day. Talk about what it was like as a little kid watching your brother play.
Oh, it was good. My brother graduated in 1949. He was an all-city guard. Miami High ran the single wing back then, and it was the big thing to get through beating Edison, keeping that tradition going alive and everything back then. And going to the game, I remember going to the game with my mother and dad. My mother was always afraid of injuries. You know, I could see her sitting up there with her fingers crossed, you know, hoping that nobody got hurt. But my dad went to the game right away. You know, he loved the football and everything like that. And I remember before my brother even started, he told my dad he was going to play football, and my dad knew it was a rough game, so he said, let me go see a game. So he brought me, and we sat in the west, I think it was the west end zone, and we watched the Miami High play Edison, and he would just loved the game. We all fell in love with the game right away, and the crowd was fantastic. And in the Orange Bowl, it was before it was renovated. You know, it didn't have the upper deck or anything like that and everything. So it was really right from the beginning and everything. But it was just a tradition, and that was a big thing about Miami High, was our tradition of winning, you know. And the coach, I think was George Trogdon was my brother's coach, and Gene Ellenson was his line coach also.
Yeah, like you mentioned, you guys played Miami Edison every Thanksgiving night at the Orange Bowl, and you guys would sometimes draw like up to 40,000 one year that you got. Yeah. What was it like playing in front of crowds that big as a 17, 16-year-old kid?
It was just something. I remember when we'd get off the bus and we'd run through. In those days, you used to run through the middle of the stadium, and they had a tunnel there, and you'd run out onto the field, and the crowd would be just unbelievable. You could hear the crowd. And when Miami High traditionally went out, and we ran and we did a circle on the field, and the captains were in the middle, and we did our calisthenics then. And but it was just, you know, even when you were playing, you could hear the crowd noise, you know, and on a big play and everything, you could hear the swell of the cheering and everything. So it was really exciting. It was just for a young kid, you know, to be and you know, playing in the Orange Bowl. I mean, most kids, you know, they play in some sandlot thing, you know, or some little stadium, the school's own stadium, and they would draw maybe maybe 5,000 if they were lucky, you know. But this and here we're playing against 40,000 people, you know. And there were just as many Edison and Jackson fans as there were Miami High then, too, you know. So
Sure, they were all powerhouse schools at that time.
All
yeah.
of them were good. They were great players. Jackie Simpson played for Edison, you know, and Lee Corso played for Jackson.
Joe Brodsky, too.
Joe Brodsky. Oh, there were just so many of them. There's a guy, Anthony Scrimmins, we called him, you know, and he was good. And they just had so many great players. And we had some good ones. We had Joe Caldwell, All-American at Army, you know, and
Lindy Infante, too.
Lindy Infante played, yeah. And we had, so many great players and everything. And who was it? I can't think of his name.
Got like Wally Piper.
T. Mormon. T. Mormon
Claude
played.
Mormon?
He played for Duke. He was an All-American at Duke. He played in my junior year. He was a senior.
You guys were like rock stars in the sense that, like, you guys were covered by the media like they covered college players or the NFL today. For example, if you picked up a Miami Herald or a Miami News back in the 50s, there were stories about high school football on the front page because there were no Dolphins, and the Hurricanes weren't really a national power just yet. So high school football was a really big deal. What was it like being covered by the media like that?
Well, we used to outdraw the University of Miami when we would play.
Yeah.
So that would go to show you. But with the media and everything, they used to come by all the time. Luther Evans was always out there covering us, you know, and his brother Dick Evans was there too, you know, and then what is it? There was
Edwin Pope around back then?
What's that?
Was Edwin Pope around back then?
Yeah, Edwin Pope was there, and they had another one. What was his name? I can't think of his name right now, but he was really a jack of all sports on Channel 4. Jack Cummings, I think was his name. And he used to come out and watch the practice, and then film some of the practices I do it there, too.
Right.
I know my first year was Charlie Tate, and he didn't want anybody with cameras out there, you know, showing what we had and everything.
Oh, wow. I mean, one of the things that separated Miami High from, like, I think the other schools is you guys had a really distinct look to you.
Yeah.
For example, you guys wore those midnight blue jerseys, and somebody once told me from that era that when they watched you guys come out of the Orange Bowl tunnel, you guys looked like a bunch of army ants coming out of there with your midnight blues, and it seemed like you guys just dressed up 100 players. Is that true?
Yeah, we used to dress everybody out. B squad, everybody.
Wow. I mean, did they encourage all the boys to play football at those days?
Oh yeah. It was a big honor to play football at Miami High. As a matter of fact, Lee Corso about the uniforms. He was a personal friend of mine. Well, I'm Italian. All the Italian families used to get together on holidays, and we'd go over to Crandon Park and everything, and that's where I met Lindy and Lee Corso and a lot of those guys. And I was talking to Lee one time. He says, when those midnight blue uniforms come out with those black helmets, you can put 6 points on the scoreboard right away. He said, that was worth that much.
I never understood, why Miami High doesn't have those uniforms today, because I think they used those uniforms all the way to like the mid 70s, and they never brought them back. And I think that would be a great throwback if they ever did it.
So too, yeah. And I remember one of the coaches wanted to change our nickname from the Stingerees to the Stingrays. Oh, and that really didn't go over very well.
Nah, that doesn't work. I mean, were there any particular games or memories of the Orange Bowl that stand out to you?
Well, yeah, one big one was the Edison game in my sophomore year. I started in that game as a sophomore, and I had a real good game. I think I made lineman of the week that week and everything. So we beat them 14-6. Joe Caldwell was our quarterback. And it was Edison had a really good team, and they were, as a matter of fact, everybody thought they would beat us. This is the year, and we beat them pretty good. We beat them 14-6, but we beat them worse than that. It was a good drum beating.
Who would you say was like your biggest rival? Was it the Edison game?
Edison, by far. Edison. Everybody was just beat Edison. Coral Gables was not the big game.
Really?
No, it was Edison was always the big game.
But at the time, like Coral Gables was coming up, and they were starting to challenge you guys, and they had their legendary coach Nick Cody's.
Yep.
And what do you remember about those Coral Gables teams when they were just coming up?
They were good. They were coming up. You know, they had Mike Harrison. They had there, and Ted Saucelle, and a lot of really good players. And Nick Cody's came to me one time, before I went to Miami High, and he said, "You're gonna know." He says, "You come to Coral Gables and everything." He says, "But I'll tell you, you won't play both ways. You won't play offense and defense." He says, "You'll only go one way." And I told him, "No." I said, "I'm going to Miami High." I told him, I said, I want to play offense and defense. So.
Oh wow.
So.
Oh, wow.
I got a chance to do it that way.
When you were at Miami High, you saw a lot of, I consider the 1950s the golden age of Dade County High School football, not necessarily because it had the most talent, but because of the interest level of the game at that time. At the time, there were only, I think, 6 major big high schools in Dade County. Talk about how different Miami was in the 1950s and how it has grown today.
Well, Miami was really a sleepy little town. You know, it was not a big town. Back there in the 50s. And it was just a great time to grow up in Miami because it was just I don't know, to be a young person in Miami, especially if you had a car, you could get around and everything like that. It was just a great place to live in, and then, the Orange Bowl and then the baseball was coming. Satchel Paige, I think, was a pitcher for, was it the Marlins or somebody?
The original Marlins, Miami Stadium,
I remember I was in the Keyhole Gang, watching them out there playing, and it was a great time. I still have all of my high school friends. We all get together, and as a matter of fact, we're going to Sebring later on this month and have a big reunion of all of the Miami High graduates.
Well, also some other changes. The Castro Revolution was going on in Cuba, and so a lot of Cubans migrated to Miami, and the area around Miami High became an area where a lot of Cubans settled. Yeah. And more and more, Miami High became a more Hispanic student body. And you started playing with some of these with some of these guys that came over from Cuba. And one of the guys that came over was a guy named Willie Gort, who later became commissioner and I think a vice mayor or mayor of Miami.
Yeah, he did. And Willie's a good friend of mine. He's as a matter of fact, he's in our group that we meet for lunch and breakfast all the time. Him, and there was a guy named Blick Carbonell who came over from Cuba and everything, and he was a tremendous linebacker. I mean, he had a forearm that would knock your head off, and he was good. And we had a few other Cuban players that we had on our team that were just ones that just came over, but not many, but a few of them that were really good, and they had to be good, if they were playing with Coach Mooney and with Charlie Tate. You had to be at your best. If you weren't at your best, there was always a guy behind you that was ready to play, So.
Right. Also, another difference that we saw in the video of Miami back in those days is that it was a southern city, and by southern city, it was a segregated city. Yeah. Not much different than, say, if you went to Atlanta at that time, or if you went to Birmingham. And I was wondering, back in those days, there were a lot of good black players and a lot of good black teams in those days. But you guys never got a chance to play those guys. But did you ever cross paths, or did you ever see those guys maybe in around the neighborhood?
No, never did. No, it was just Miami. What that area I lived in was just all white, so lived in.
Because I did some research, and you guys played at the Orange Bowl, obviously. On Thanksgiving, you would play Edison. A couple of those years, the Northwestern High School had played Booker T in the morning. Did you guys know that there was a game that was played in the morning?
I didn't even know about it.
Oh, wow. Wow. Yeah. Now, another big change is the size of the players.
Yeah.
Tell us how big you were when you played.
I was 185 pounds.
And you were an offensive and defensive lineman.
Yes, I was a middle guard on defense and a right guard on offense.
Wow. So if you weighed 200 pounds back then, you were considered huge.
Yes. So we had the biggest guy on our team was about 220 pounds. Jerry Garman. He was a left guard. And that was the biggest guy on our team.
Wow.
Yeah, most of them were. But I tell you one thing: what Coach Mooney and Coach Charlie Tate emphasized was speed. Mm-hmm. And if you look at Jimmy Johnson, he said speed kills. He says you know, football is a game of speed, not a game of size, really, when you really get down to it. And if you look at some of the teams that are not as big as the other teams that are playing, even in the pros, and they'll win because of speed.
Now, even though would you consider yourself somewhat undersized even for your time?
Yeah. Yeah, I was a little bit. But, no, I was about for a guard. 185 pounds was about the right size.
Okay.
You know, it wasn't too. I wasn't undersized. At the University of Miami, I was.
Right, and so even though you were undersized, you were one of the top players in the state. You were named All-State. You were twice named All-City, and you earned a scholarship to the University of Miami, just like your brother. You followed in your brother's footsteps. You got to play with some pretty good players at UM. You played with a guy in the offensive line by the name of Jim Otto.
Yeah.
Later went on to become 00 for the Oakland Raiders. What was it like playing with Otto?
Otto was a great player. I tell you, when he was in college and everything, as I told you before, I used to line up against him, you know, in scrimmages and everything, and he held a lot. I'll tell you.
Oh, really?
But he was a great player. I tell you, you know, he had a bad leg. You know, he had his knee operated on, so he wasn't real mobile. Mm-hmm. But he was a great player. You know,
and you played against George Meyer when he was at Key West High, and then you later became his teammate at the University of Miami. Right. What kind of player was George Meyer?
George is a great player. He was one of the greatest quarterbacks we ever had, I think. You know, he was. I remember one time in the Orange Bowl, he was playing against Florida, and we were down on the goal line, and we couldn't score, and he rolls out to the left, and he throws a left-handed pass in for a touchdown, and the crowd just went crazy. I'm telling you, when they saw that, you know, you just. He's a great quarterback.
And of course, you played for Andy Gustafson, who, you know, a lot of Hurricane fans may not know that Andy Gustafson is actually the winningest coach in Miami history. He has as many wins as Howard Schnellenberger and Jimmy Johnson combined. Of course, he coached 16 years. Yeah. But you played for Gustafson. But another guy who was on Gustafson's staff for 1 year was Hank Stram. Yeah. Do you remember Hank?
Yeah, I remember Hank Stram. He was good. He was very good. I mean, he was mostly with the backs and everything like that, you know. But he was a very good coach. He didn't coach me very much, you know. Didn't have much to him.
Right.
One thing that I'm proud of, that when I played, I was an All-American at Miami. You know, it's Scholastic Magazine All-American. That's right. So I'm proud of that. And I was picked by the sportscasters as the best football player in the state of Florida in my senior year. So,
you know, I was talking to Fred Darwick, who I consider like the Miami High historian.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
And Fred was telling me that he considered you probably the best offensive lineman to play at Miami High during the 1950s, and that's quite
that is an honor. I didn't know that. That's quite an honor.
Now, what did you go on to do after your days at the University of Miami?
Well, the family business, we were in the marble and tile business, and my dad was the president, and my brother was the vice president, and then he became the president. And I worked, during the summers and everything, when I was playing at Miami High, I had to work out on the jobs, and you know, working on the mixing boxes and everything was a great workout. I'll tell you, you really worked up a sweat. But then when I got there, I started doing the estimating, and I did all the estimating, and then I became vice president and president. So we did some of the big jobs around Miami. You know, some of the the hotels and stuff like that around there. We did Dayland Mall and stuff like that. Big jobs. Hospitals.
You were telling me earlier that you were born in Schenectady, New York, I believe it was?
Ellis Hospital.
But really, Miami's been your home just about your entire life.
Since I was 6 years old, yes.
Did you ever think of leaving town?
Never.
Even when you were like recruited out of high school, maybe?
No, it was one of the reasons I went to Miami is because I wanted to stay in Miami. Yeah.
Wow. And did you continue going to UM games at the Orange Bowl?
I stopped going when the Orange Bowl was torn down.
Wow. You know? So you don't go to the games at Hard Rock?
No, it's just too far away. I live in South Miami, so it's just too far away to go.
Oh, wow. What about, do you stay in touch with the Miami High program? Or do you remember the last time you'd gone to a Miami High game?
Yes, I do, and it was at what is that stadium out in on?
Is it Curtis Park?
No, it wasn't Curtis Park. It's another one that they played. Not Curly, Columbus.
Tropical Park?
Tropical, yes. They played Columbus there, and as a matter of fact, Columbus got way ahead in the game. You know, Miami High scored first, and then Columbus scored about 2 or 3 touchdowns. And all of my buddies, a lot of my friends, when I went to the game and everything, all left. And I said, well, I'm going to stick around. Well, Miami came back and won the game.
Oh, wow.
I called them up. I said, what'd you guys leave so early for? We won.
You guys left an amazing legacy that just cannot be matched. I think Miami High has won only one state championship since the playoff era in 1965. But even more recent years, they have produced some good players like Eddie Brown, Andre Johnson, Roscoe Parrish. So I believe Miami High is celebrating. I think they just celebrated their 100th year of football, I think. Was there ever any kind of like massive reunion for that?
We have a reunion almost every year, yes. We have one of our players is Bill Eads, puts together a program like we're going to Sebring, and then we have another one that I think they go to Atlanta someplace, and they have for all Miami High graduates and everything like that, where they all get together.
And you're part of also, I think they also have a Hall of Fame too.
Yes.
Were you a part of that committee, or
I was on the committee, yes.
Oh, okay, all right.
And I'm in it.
And do you guys still get together and
Yeah, they still have a Hall of Fame. You know, I'm not on the committee anymore, but they still have it, and we pick out several players from all sports. You know, football, basketball, baseball, and everything.
Wow. Well, Gene, I appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Thank you.
You've been a tremendous guest, and you're part of really one of the most forgotten parts of the Orange Bowl's history, because a lot of people just think of the Dolphins and the Hurricanes, but really high school football, and a lot of people don't know this, is that the very first game played at the Orange Bowl was a high school game between Edison and I think Ponce de Leon.
Yeah, that's Coral Gables High now. Yeah.
Right. And then I think the last high school game played there was an all-star game that hardly anybody went to in 2008. It was coached by Terry Kirby and Chris Carter, former NFL players that play there. But you were such a big part of the Orange Bowl's history, and I want to thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. And then one thing was sad that I thought is the University of Miami's last game in the Orange Bowl, they lost to Virginia. I don't know if you remember that.
Well, yes, I do.
And I remember in the last game, you know, I have my seats. Everybody was there. They knew it was the last game. Everybody pulled up their seat because it just was clipped down. And I have the 2 seats that my season ticket seats. I still have them in my garage someplace.
Oh, wow. You got any other little pieces of memorabilia that you keep?
Seats, you'd sit in,
The plastic covers, right. Oh, wow. Because I remember, I think when you played, I think they didn't have the plastic seat. I think they even had fiberglass benches.
Yes, it was, fiberglass benches.
So if you sat on those benches and you were wearing shorts, you might get splinters on your legs or something like that. That's what I heard.
Yeah.
That's before my time, but I heard about that. But thank you so much for joining us.
It's really an honor to be here, and I really thank you so much, and you brought back a lot of memories to me and everything of Miami High and the Orange Bowl.
Thanks, Gene. For the Ghost of the Orange Bowl, I'm Jay Rao, and we'll see you again.